Part 1. The House She Loved. The first time my son-in-law mentioned renting out the beach house, I thought I'd misheard him. We were sitting at the long wooden table in my kitchen, the same one my wife, Eleanor, insisted we keep, even after the legs started wobbling. Sunlight came through the window, dust floating in the air, and for a moment, everything felt normal. Then, he smiled. That polite, practiced smile people use when they've already made up their minds. "You're not really using it anymore," he said, folding his hands like a banker closing a deal. "It just makes sense. The beach house. Eleanor's beach house." I didn't answer right away. I stared at the coffee mug in my hands, the one with a faded blue shell painted on the side. Eleanor bought it during our last summer there. The summer before she got sick. She used to wake up early, barefoot, and walk straight to the shore. She said the ocean reminded her that time never stopped, no matter how much pain tried to slow it down. That house wasn't just property, it was her. My son-in-law didn't know that. Or maybe he didn't, just didn't care. "Dad," my daughter added gently, though she wouldn't meet my eyes, "we're just talking about options." Options. That's a funny word people use when they want permission to take something that isn't theirs. I nodded, slowly. "We'll see," I said. And that was when they assumed they'd won. If you're listening to this story and you've ever felt like someone tried to erase your past, your memories, or the person you loved most, make sure you subscribe. Stories like this aren't just about revenge. They're about dignity, patience, and the quiet kind of justice that comes when people underestimate you. Because that's exactly what my son-in-law did. He underestimated me. The beach house sat 3 hours away, tucked behind a line of weathered dunes, white siding, green shutters, a porch that creaked when you walked on it. Eleanor used to joke that the house complained as much as I did, but every complaint meant it was still standing, still alive. After her funeral, I couldn't bring myself to go there. I told myself I'd return when the ache was smaller, when walking through the door didn't feel like tearing open a wound. That delay was their opening. A week later, my son-in-law sent me a spreadsheet, projected earnings, seasonal demand, renovation costs. He even highlighted the monthly profit in green, as if money could replace memory, as if strangers dragging suitcases across Eleanor's floorboards was a harmless idea. I didn't reply, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I knew exactly what I was going to do that night. I opened the small lockbox Eleanor kept in our bedroom closet.
Inside were documents I hadn't touched since she passed. Letters, deeds, a handwritten notebook with her looping cursive on every page, and one envelope, yellowed, sealed, addressed to me. "If they ever try to take the house," the note inside began, "you'll know what to do." My hands trembled as I read the rest. Eleanor had always been 10 steps ahead of everyone, including them. "Oh!" The next morning my son-in-law called me. Bright voice, confident. "We've already spoken to a property manager," he said. "Just need you to sign a few things." I smiled into the phone. "Don't do anything yet," I replied calmly. "I'm coming down to the beach house this weekend." There was a pause. "Oh," he said. "You don't have to." "I want to," I said. "After all, it was my wife's." Another pause. Longer this time. "Of course," he said carefully. "We'll talk when you get there." Yes, we would. He thought this was a negotiation. He had no idea it was the beginning of the end. Oh, that Friday, I packed a single overnight bag and placed the envelope back into the lockbox. I didn't need to bring it with me. Not yet. As I locked the front door, I took one last look at the house Eleanor and I had shared for decades. Then I got into my car and started the drive toward the ocean, toward the truth, toward the plan she and I had made together long before anyone else. Thought to ask what the beach house was worth. Oh, coming in part 2. When I arrive at the beach house, I discover they've already crossed a line. And I learned just how far my son-in-law is willing to go to claim something that was never his. Part 2. Lines that were already crossed. The ocean greeted me before the house did. That familiar scent of salt and damp wood slipped through my cracked window as I pulled onto the narrow road leading to the beach. For a split second, my chest tightened, not with grief this time, but with something sharper. Instinct. Eleanor used to say the sea warned you before storms arrived. I was beginning to understand what she meant. When the house finally came into view, my foot eased off the gas without me realizing it. Something felt off. The porch light was on. I hadn't turned it on. I parked slowly, gravel crunching under my tires, and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. The place looked the same from the outside. White siding, green shutters, wine chimes still hanging by the door, but familiarity can be deceiving. I stepped out, the wind tugging at my jacket, and climbed the porch steps. The door was unlocked. Unlocked. My heart sank. Inside, the air smelled different. Not just salt and old wood, but lemon cleaner. Fresh, sharp, wrong. I walked in slowly. The furniture had been moved. Not rearranged, replaced. Eleanor's blue armchair was gone. The bookshelf we built together had been pushed against a wall. Empty except for a few neutral decorations that screamed rental staging. The framed photo of Eleanor laughing on the beach, gone. My jaw tightened. They hadn't waited for permission. They hadn't waited for me. I walked through the house like a stranger in my own memories. Every room told the same story. Traces of Eleanor erased, scrubbed clean to make space for temporary guests and 5-star reviews. In the bedroom, it was worse. The quilt Eleanor sewed herself, folded and shoved into a plastic bin. Her seashell lamp replaced with a bland hotel-style fixture. A laminated card sat neatly on the nightstand. Welcome. Please review the house rules. I picked it up with shaking fingers. House rules? This was no longer just about money. This was theft. Oh, I stood there longer than I should have. Breathing slowly, reminding myself not to act on anger. Eleanor hated rash decisions. She believed in timing, and timing I knew was everything. My phone buzzed. A message from my son-in-law. Hope you made it safely. We listed the house already. Figured it'd save time. First guests arrive next week. Listed. Already? I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. Then I locked my phone and slipped it into my pocket. No reply. Not yet. Oh! That evening I sat alone on the porch, watching the sun melt into the horizon. The waves crashed softly like they always had. Eleanor used to sit right where I was, legs tucked beneath her, humming tunes she claimed she couldn't sing. This place listens, she once said. Treat it kindly. I wondered what she'd say now. Behind me, I heard footsteps. I turned to see my daughter stepping onto the porch, followed closely by her husband. He wore that same confident smile. Dad, she said, tentative. You're here. I said I'd come, I replied. He glanced around approvingly. Looks good, right? We modernized it a bit. I didn't answer. You should have told me, I said instead, before touching anything. My daughter shifted uncomfortably. We assumed. He cut in smoothly. We're just managing things responsibly. You're not really in a position to oversee property like this. There it was. The implication. Age, fragility, incompetence. Eleanor warned me this moment would come. I met his eyes calmly. You assumed wrong. His smile tightened. Dad, it's already done. Guests are booked. The income, I don't care about the income. He scoffed lightly. That's easy to say when you're not thinking practically. I stood up slowly. This house belonged to Eleanor, I said, and she trusted me to protect it. He crossed his arms. You don't own it alone. That sentence hung in the air like a challenge. My daughter looked between us, anxiety flickering across her face. Can we not do this right now? But it was already done. They'd crossed the line, and now they were standing on the other side of it. Oh! That night, after they left, I went back to the bedroom and opened the plastic bin. I lifted Eleanor's quilt gently, as if she could still feel it. Underneath it was something they'd missed. A floorboard slightly looser than the rest. I smiled faintly. Eleanor always said people who rush forget to look closely. I knelt, pried the board open, and found the thin metal case exactly where she'd left it. Inside were copies of documents, trust amendments, deed restrictions, letters notarized years ago, and one final page written in her hand. If anyone tries to turn my home into something it's not, remind them who truly owns it. I closed the case carefully. They thought they were ahead. They thought listing the house made it theirs. They had no idea they'd activated something Eleanor and I put in place long before she ever got sick. Oh! The next morning, I sent a single text to my son-in-law. Cancel the bookings. He replied almost instantly. We can't. Contracts are signed. I smiled. Then I made one phone call. Not to a lawyer, not to a property manager, but to someone Eleanor trusted more than anyone. When the call ended, I stood by the window and watched the waves roll in. The storm Eleanor warned about wasn't coming. It had already arrived. Oh, coming in part 3. The guests arrive early, legal papers surface, and my son-in-law realizes the beach house was never as simple or as profitable as he believed. Part 3. When the guests arrived too soon. The knock came earlier than expected. I was still in the kitchen, coffee cooling beside me, when I heard wheels rolling across the porch. Suitcases, multiple. Voices followed. Cheerful and unaware. Guests. 3 days early. I closed my eyes for a moment, steadying myself. Eleanor used to say that when plans fall apart, it's because someone rushed where patience was required. I opened the door. A young couple stood there, sunburned smiles and beach hats in hand. Behind them, a second car pulled in, then a third. Laughter drifted through the air like nothing was wrong. Hi, the woman said brightly. We're checking in. This place is gorgeous. I nodded once. I'm afraid there's been a mistake. Her smile faltered. But we booked weeks ago. I know, I said gently. That's the mistake. Confusion rippled through the group. Phones came out. Screens were shoved toward me. Confirmation emails. Payment receipts, glowing 5-star promises. My son-in-law's handiwork. I'm sorry, I repeated, voice calm. This house is not available for rent. The man frowned. We already paid. I understand, I said. And you'll be refunded. By who? He snapped. I stepped aside and gestured to the living room. Please, come in. Let's make some calls. 10 minutes later, my son-in-law answered on the third ring. What is it now? He said, irritation dripping through the speaker. You have guests here, I replied. Early. A pause, then a curse under his breath. That's impossible. They're standing in my living room, I said. And they'd like their money back. His voice sharpened. You had no right to interfere. I have every right, I said quietly. This house was never yours to list. That's not what the paperwork says, he shot back. I glanced at the thin metal case Eleanor left me, sitting open on the dining table. We'll see. Oh! Within an hour the guests were gone, angry but refunded in full. I even paid for their hotel down the road. Eleanor would have insisted. As the last car pulled away, my phone buzzed again. You're making this worse than it needs to be. I typed back. You already did that. Then I did something I should have done the moment I saw the porch light on. I changed the locks. Oh! That afternoon, my daughter arrived alone. She looked tired. Not angry, worried. You embarrassed him, she said quietly. I protected your mother's home, I replied. She exhaled sharply. You could have talked to us. I tried, I said. You assumed instead. She sat across from me, hands folded. He says you're being stubborn. That this is about control. I slid one document across the table. Her eyes scanned it, then widened. What is this? A trust amendment, I said. Filed 3 years ago. Her voice dropped. Why didn't I know about this? Because Eleanor didn't want you caught in the middle, I said softly. She loved you too much. The document spelled it out clearly. The beach house could never be rented, leased or altered without unanimous consent, including mine. Violation triggered automatic forfeiture of management rights. And profits. My daughter swallowed. He didn't mention this. No, I said. He wouldn't. Oh, that evening my son-in-law showed up unannounced. Furious. You blindsided us, he shouted, slamming his hand on the counter. Do you know how much money we've lost? I met his gaze evenly. Do you know how much trust you broke? He sneered. You're hiding behind paperwork. No, I said. I'm standing on it. He leaned closer. You think this ends here? I smiled faintly. No, I think this is where it begins. Oh, after he stormed out, my phone rang again. This time it wasn't family. Mr. Hale, a woman said, this is the county registrar's office. We received an inquiry regarding an ownership dispute on your beach property. Yes, I said. I expected that. There's something unusual, she continued. Your wife filed an additional clause. It hasn't been triggered in years. My grip tightened. What clause? If any beneficiary attempts to exploit the property for personal gain, she said slowly, ownership reverts entirely to the surviving spouse. The room felt very quiet. I thanked her and hung up. Eleanor hadn't just protected the house. She'd anticipated betrayal. Oh, that night I sat on the porch again, the wind carrying the sound of the ocean like a secret shared only with me. They thought this was about a rental. They thought it was about money. They had no idea what Eleanor had truly left behind, or what would happen once the clause was formally activated. And tomorrow it would be. Oh, coming in part 4. Legal notices arrive, my son-in-law scrambles to regain control. And a revelation from Eleanor's past changes the power balance completely. Part 4, the clause they never read. The legal notice arrived the next morning. Not by email, not by phone, by courier. A thick envelope, cream-colored, stamped with the county seal, addressed to all listed beneficiaries of Eleanor Hale's estate. I watched from the porch as the delivery van disappeared down the road, already knowing what chaos would follow once that envelope was opened. Eleanor never liked confrontation, but she loved preparation. Oh, by noon my phone was ringing nonstop. My daughter called first. Dad, she said, her voice trembling. What did Mom put in her will? I closed my eyes. She put in truth. She never told us. She told me, I interrupted gently, and she asked me not to warn you. She said if someone planned to misuse what she loved, they'd reveal themselves without help. There was silence on the line. Then quietly, he's furious. I know. Oh, an hour later, her husband called. He didn't bother pretending this time. You sabotaged us, he hissed. That clause is insane. It's legal, I replied calmly. You knew about it. I honored it. He laughed bitterly. Do you have any idea how much revenue this property could generate? Yes, I said. And Eleanor knew how much damage greed could cause. You're an old man clinging to a memory, he snapped. This house is wasted on nostalgia. That was when I stopped being patient. This house, I said slowly, was paid for with your mother-in-law's first book advance. It sheltered her while she fought cancer. It is where she recorded the last voice message you ever heard from her. I leaned closer to the phone. And it will never be your business venture. He hung up. Oh, that afternoon my attorney arrived. Elaine Porter, sharp-eyed, silver-haired, and absolutely unamused by nonsense. She laid out the situation cleanly. The clause is airtight, she said. Once the attempted commercial use was documented, ownership reverted to you alone. Not partially, completely. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. And them? I asked. Elaine's lips curved slightly. They're out. Oh, but Eleanor wasn't finished. Elaine slid another folder across the table. This was filed separately, she said. A contingency directive. I opened it and felt my breath catch. It was a letter, handwritten, dated 4 years ago. Oh? If you're reading this, then someone tried to turn my sanctuary into a commodity. I'm sorry you had to see this side of them. But I trusted you to handle it, with kindness if possible, and strength if necessary. There's one more thing you need to know. My hands trembled as I turned the page. Oh, the beach house wasn't just sentimental. It was protected land, a small coastal conservation easement Eleanor had quietly secured, tied to her late mother's name. Any commercial misuse would trigger not just forfeiture, but penalties. Massive ones. Fines, back taxes, legal action. All enforceable. All unavoidable. Elaine nodded. They're exposed. Oh, that evening my daughter came back, alone again. She looked like she hadn't slept. He never told me about any of this, she said, sitting heavily at the table. He said Mom was just being dramatic. I slid the letter toward her. She read it once. Then again, tears fell silently onto the page. She knew, my daughter whispered. She knew this would happen. I reached for her hand. She hoped it wouldn't. She trusted you, she said. Yes, I replied. And you're still my daughter. That hasn't changed. She nodded slowly. But my marriage might. Oh, the next morning, headlines broke on a local real estate forum. Unauthorized Airbnb listings pulled amid legal dispute. Comments followed quickly. Speculation, screenshots, accusations. My son-in-law's name began circulating, attached to words, like misrepresentation and breach of trust. By afternoon, his business partner called me. We didn't know, the man said hurriedly. We're pulling out. Then another, and another. By sunset, the empire he was building on Eleanor's memory had collapsed entirely. Oh, that night, I stood in Eleanor's old study. The lamp glowed softly over her desk, just as she'd left it. I whispered, "You planned this down to the last detail." The wind rattled the window gently, like a laugh only I could hear. Oh, but the story wasn't over, because the clause didn't just protect the house. It named a successor, and the person Eleanor chose would shock everyone. Oh, coming in part 5. The successor is revealed, alliances fracture, and my son-in-law makes one desperate move that threatens to destroy everything he has left.
Part 5. The name no one expected. The letter didn't end where I thought it would. At the bottom of the final page, beneath Eleanor's signature, there was one more line, short, deliberate, unmistakably hers. If the sanctuary is ever threatened, stewardship passes to the one who respected it. When no one was watching, Elaine looked up from the document. There's an attached designation. She turned the page, and there it was. A name. Not my daughter's. Not mine. Someone else entirely. My daughter stared at it, confusion replacing her tears. Who is that? I swallowed. It's the caretaker, I said quietly. The woman who's looked after the house for years. Martha, the older woman who lived 3 houses down. The one who watered Eleanor's plants when we couldn't make the drive. who refused payment half the time, who used to sit on the porch with Eleanor in the evenings sharing tea in silence. Elaine nodded. Legally, Eleanor named her as protective steward. Not owner, but guardian, with veto power over any future use. My daughter's voice trembled. You mean he can never touch it? Correct, Elaine said. Not now, not ever. The reaction was immediate. My son-in-law showed up that night in a fury I hadn't seen before. This is insane, he shouted, pacing the living room. You gave control of $1 million property to a nobody? I didn't raise my voice. She's not a nobody, I said. She was there when Eleanor needed her most. She's manipulating you, he snapped. This is elder abuse. Elaine stepped forward, calm and lethal. Sir, your attempted commercial exploitation triggered every safeguard in the estate. Any further accusations will be added to the existing record. He turned to my daughter. You're okay with this? She hesitated. Then she straightened. No, she said softly. But I'm okay with Mom deciding. His face hardened. You're choosing him over me? She met his gaze. I'm choosing honesty. That should have been the end of it. But desperation makes people reckless. 2 days later, Martha called me, her voice shaking. They came, she said. Men asking questions. Taking pictures of the house. My heart dropped. Did they say who sent them? She paused. They didn't have to. Elaine moved fast. Cease and desist letters, restraining orders, formal notices to local authorities. By evening, my son-in-law's name appeared again, this time in a police report. Harassment, intimidation, unauthorized surveillance. When confronted, he denied everything, but the evidence stacked up quickly. Too quickly. My daughter arrived late that night, suitcase in hand. I'm staying here, she said quietly. For a while. I nodded and opened the door wider. She sat at the kitchen table, head in her hands. I didn't marry the man I thought I did, she whispered. I poured her tea, the same blend Eleanor loved. Sometimes, I said gently, we don't see the truth until someone we trust removes the blindfold. The final blow came a week later. A formal notice from the county. Due to documented misuse attempts and harassment tied to the property, my son-in-law was banned from any future involvement with protected coastal assets. Blacklisted. His business partner called again, this time furious. We're done, the man said. You cost us everything. I almost corrected him. But I didn't. That evening, Martha came by the house. She stood awkwardly in the doorway, hat in her hands. I never asked for this, she said. I know, I replied. She smiled sadly. Eleanor said that if the house ever needed defending, it wouldn't be lawyers who saved it. It would be people who loved it. I felt my throat tighten. She trusted you, I said. Martha nodded. And now I'll protect it. But later that night, my phone buzzed. One final message from my son-in-law. You've won, but you've destroyed this family. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I deleted it. Because Eleanor taught me something important. Truth doesn't destroy families. Greed does. The beach house stood quiet again. Not as a rental. Not as an asset. But as a promise kept. And in the silence, I finally understood what Eleanor had planned all along. She didn't just protect the house. She revealed who deserved to stay in our lives and who never did. Coming in Part 6. The aftermath forces a painful choice, a legal separation, and one final visit to the beach house that changes how I remember. Eleanor forever. Part 6. The last visit before goodbye. The house felt different once the noise stopped. No phones buzzing. No lawyers calling. No footsteps that didn't belong. Just the ocean. I drove back to the beach house alone the following weekend. Not because I had to, but because something inside me told me it was time. Eleanor used to say places remember things people forget. When I unlocked the door, it opened easily, like it had been waiting. The air smelled the way it always had, salt, sun-warmed wood, and something faintly floral from the old candles Eleanor loved. I stood there longer than necessary, letting the quiet settle into my bones. For the first time since her death, I wasn't angry. I wasn't defensive. I was simply present. I walked through each room slowly, not inspecting, remembering. The kitchen where she burned toast every Sunday morning and laughed like it was a personal victory. The living room, where she curled up with books she pretended not to finish. The bedroom, where she used to sit on the edge of the bed brushing her hair, telling me about dreams she never chased but never regretted. And finally, the porch. I sat in her old chair and watched the waves roll in, steady and patient. That was Eleanor's rhythm. Never rushed. Never wasted. My phone buzzed once. A message from my daughter. He's moving out. We're filing for separation. I closed my eyes. Not relief. Not satisfaction. Just sadness for what might have been if honesty had come sooner. I typed back, I love you. Take your time. Nothing more needed to be said. But later that afternoon, Martha stopped by. She brought lemon bars, just like Eleanor used to make. We sat side by side on the porch without talking for a long while. She loved this time of day, Martha said eventually. Said it was when the ocean tells the truth. I smiled faintly. She always listened. Martha hesitated. Are you sure about the stewardship? I don't want to overstep. You won't, I said. You'll protect it. That's all she asked. Martha nodded, eyes misting. I will with my whole heart. Before she left, she handed me something small. A key. She told me to give you this when things were settled. My breath caught. It fit a drawer in the study I'd never opened. The inside was a thin notebook. Eleanor's final one. Not legal notes. Not plans. Just reflections. If you're reading this, then the house is safe again. I sat at her desk reading until the light outside dimmed. She wrote about forgiveness, not the kind that excuses harm, but the kind that frees you from carrying it. About knowing when to let people walk away without chasing them. About love that doesn't cling but trusts. One line stopped me cold. If someone tries to take what I loved, let it show you who they are. Then let them go. I closed the notebook gently. That night I slept in the house for the first time since her funeral. No dreams. No tears. Just rest. The next morning I locked the door behind me, not with fear but with certainty. Some chapters are meant to be guarded. Others are meant to end. As I drove away, the house stood quiet against the sky. No longer a battleground, but a boundary. A reminder. A promise kept. And for the first time since Eleanor passed, I didn't feel like I was protecting her memory alone. She had already done the protecting. All I had to do was honor it. Part 7. What came after silence. Life didn't snap back into place the way people expect after everything explodes. There was no sudden peace. No clean relief. Just space. And space, I learned, can be heavier than chaos. After I returned from the beach house, days passed quietly. My daughter stayed with me, moving through the house like someone relearning how to breathe. Some mornings she was strong. Others she sat at the table staring into her tea long after it went cold. One evening she finally spoke. I keep wondering, she said softly, how I missed it. I didn't answer right away. You didn't miss it, I said. You trusted someone. That's not a flaw. She nodded, eyes glistening. He keeps texting, apologizing, blaming stress, blaming money. And what do you feel? I asked. She exhaled slowly. Tired. That word told me everything. The legal separation moved faster than either of us expected. Once the house issue surfaced, once the harassment reports became part of the record, his tone shifted. No more confidence, no more entitlement, just fear. He tried to negotiate. Through lawyers, through mutual friends, through messages meant for sympathy. But something had broken that couldn't be repaired. Trust doesn't shatter loudly. It fractures quietly, until one day you realize there's nothing left to hold. But a week later, Eleanor's conservation clause officially went public. Local news ran a short piece. Coastal property preserved through private stewardship agreement. No names, no drama, just the truth, standing calmly where exploitation once tried to take root. Martha called me that evening. They're thanking her, she said. People I've never met, saying the house matters to the coastline. I smiled. It always did, I replied. But then came the unexpected call. My son-in-law's business partner. He sounded smaller than I remembered. I owe you an apology, he said stiffly. I believed his version of things. You believed what benefited you, I replied. That's different. He hesitated. He's lost everything, reputation, funding, connections. I didn't respond. He wants to speak to you, the man added. No, I said calmly. Silence followed. Then understood. But that night I sat with Eleanor's notebook again. One passage stood out. There will come a moment when you're offered closure through confrontation. Refuse it. Peace doesn't come from the last word, it comes from walking away. I closed the book. She was right. Again. But my daughter finalized her decision 2 days later. She came into the living room, papers in hand. I'm done, she said. I stood and hugged her tightly. I'm proud of you, I whispered. She pulled back slightly. I didn't choose the easy thing. No, I agreed. You chose the honest one. But the beach house remained untouched. No listings. No renovations. No strangers. Just waves, wind, and a woman named Martha who treated it like a living thing. Sometimes she sent photos. Sunsets. Storm clouds. A repaired step on the porch. Each image felt like proof that Eleanor's plan hadn't just worked. It had endured. But one evening, as my daughter and I washed dishes together, she smiled suddenly. You know, she said, he used to call you stubborn. I chuckled softly. I prefer prepared. She laughed, for real this time. And in that laugh I knew something important. We weren't just surviving what happened. We were moving past it. But later, alone in my room, I looked at a photo of Eleanor taken years ago on that same porch. Wind in her hair, smile unbothered, eyes knowing. They didn't win, I said quietly. The house was safe. My daughter was free, and the silence no longer felt heavy. It felt earned. Coming in Part 8. A year later, a surprise decision reshapes the future of the beach, house, and I'm forced to decide what. Legacy truly means when letting go is the final act of love. Part 8. The legacy question. A year passed more quietly than I expected. Not because nothing happened, but because the loudest battles were finally behind us. Life settled into a slower rhythm. My daughter found her own place nearby, close enough to visit but far enough to breathe. She started smiling again, the kind that reaches the eyes instead of stopping halfway. And the beach house? It waited, patient, steady, untouched by greed, until one letter arrived. It came from the County Conservation Board, forwarded by Martha with a short note. Eleanor's work is being noticed. I opened the envelope at the kitchen table. The board wanted to formally designate the surrounding land as a protected coastal heritage site, limited access, no development, educational visits only. Eleanor's name would be listed as the original sponsor. It was everything she believed in, and everything that would change the house forever. That night I drove to the coast again. The porch creaked under my feet as I sat down, the ocean stretching endlessly before me. I held the letter in my hands, reading it again by the soft glow of the porch light. If I agreed, the house would no longer be ours in the traditional sense. No private summers, no family-only weekends, no passing it down as property. Instead, it would become something larger, a place protected not for profit but for meaning. I could almost hear Eleanor's voice. What do you want this place to become when we're gone? Martha joined me quietly, 2 mugs of tea in her hands. They want to honor her, she said gently. I know, I replied. But you're not sure, she added. I smiled sadly. Letting go doesn't always feel like loss, but it still feels like letting go. Martha nodded. Eleanor once told me legacy isn't about ownership. It's about continuity. I looked out at the waves, endless and unclaimed. That sounds like her. The decision wasn't mine alone. I gathered my daughter and sons the following weekend. We sat around the same table where this all began, the air lighter now, but still serious. I laid out the proposal. Daniel read carefully. Lucas leaned back, thoughtful. My daughter stayed quiet the longest. Finally, she spoke. Mom didn't protect that house so we could own it, she said softly. She protected it so it wouldn't be used. Daniel nodded. She'd want it safe, even from us. Lucas smiled faintly. She always thought long-term. I felt something loosen in my chest. So you're saying, I asked. My daughter reached across the table and took my hand. I'm saying we let it become what she meant it to be. But I signed the papers the next morning. Not with a heavy heart, with a steady one. The beach house would remain standing, but not as an asset, not as leverage, not as inheritance bait, as a promise, a place where the ocean could keep telling the truth long after we were gone. But the announcement came quietly. A small plaque was placed near the porch, in memory of Eleanor Hale, who chose preservation over possession. No last name debates, no headlines, just words that mattered. That evening, I walked through the house one final time as its owner. I didn't rush. I touched the door frames, the banister, the window Eleanor loved most. Then I locked the door and handed the keys to Martha. Take care of her, I said. Martha smiled through tears. I will. As I walked back to my car, I didn't look back. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood something Eleanor had known all along. Some places aren't meant to be kept. They're meant to be protected. But, coming in part 9, years later, a young visitor asks a question that forces me to tell Eleanor's story for the first time, and I realized the house gave back more than it ever took. Part 9, the question no one had asked. I didn't return to the beach house for a long time. Not because I wasn't welcome, but because I wanted the place to exist without me hovering over it, the way Eleanor always intended. I received updates from Martha now and then. Photos of school groups walking along the dunes, Notes about nesting birds. Repairs made quietly, carefully. Life moved forward. And then one afternoon it circled back. I was visiting the coast for a community meeting when Martha suggested I stop by. "Just for a moment," she said. "Someone would like to meet you." I hesitated but agreed. The house looked the same. White siding, green shutters, porch worn smooth by years of footsteps. The plaque near the steps caught the sunlight gently. Inside, a small group had gathered. Teachers, volunteers, a handful of students from a nearby college. They were polite, curious, respectful. And then there was her, a young girl, maybe 10 or 11, standing near the window Eleanor loved most. She had a notebook clutched to her chest and a look of deep concentration, like she was trying to memorize the sound of the waves. She turned when she saw me. "Are you Eleanor?" she asked. The room went still. I smiled softly. "No, I was her husband." Her eyes widened. "You knew her?" "I did," I replied. "Very well." She stepped closer, thoughtful. "Our teacher said this house was saved because someone loved it enough not to sell it." I nodded. She tilted her head. "Why?" That was the question. Not what happened, not who fought whom, just why. I took a breath. "Because some places hold more than walls," I said. "They hold choices." And she believed choices mattered more than money. The girl scribbled something in her notebook. "She sounds brave," she said. I smiled. She was, quietly. Later, the group moved on. Martha poured tea, and we sat on the porch like old times. "That girl lost her grandmother last year," Martha said softly. "She's been asking questions ever since." I watched the waves roll in, endless and patient. "So was Eleanor," I said. But as the sun dipped lower, the girl returned, alone this time. "My teacher said you might tell me more," she said shyly. I gestured to the empty chair beside me. I told her about Eleanor walking the beach at dawn, about her laughter when seagulls stole her snacks, about the way she believed protecting something was a form of love. I didn't tell her about contracts, or clauses, or betrayal, just truth. When I finished, the girl looked out at the ocean and whispered, "I think she's still here." I followed her gaze. "I think so too," I said. But that evening, as I prepared to leave, the girl handed me her notebook. Inside was a simple drawing of the house, the waves, and a woman standing on the porch, smiling. Above it, she had written, "Some people save places. Some places save people." My throat tightened. But driving away, I realized something Eleanor had given me that I hadn't noticed before. Her story didn't end with ownership. It didn't end with victory. It continued, quietly, through strangers who would never know her name, but would feel her choices all the same. The house hadn't just survived greed. It had become a teacher. But that night I placed the girl's drawing beside Eleanor's notebook. 2 generations connected by one decision. And for the first time I understood what legacy really meant. It wasn't what you keep, it was what you allow to live on without you. But coming in part 10 final, on the anniversary of Eleanor's passing, I return one last time and finally say goodbye, not with grief, but with gratitude. Part 10, letting the tide carry it forward, final. I return to the beach house on the anniversary of Eleanor's passing. Not because I was invited, not because I had to, but because some places call you one last time, softly before they release you. The morning was calm. No wind, no crowds. The ocean lay stretched out like a deep, steady breath. I walked up the familiar path, my steps slower now, not from age, but from intention. Martha was waiting on the porch. She's inside, she said gently. I nodded. Thank you. Inside, the house felt alive in a way it never had before. Not frozen in memory, not preserved like a museum, but lived in, carefully, respectfully. Children's drawings hung near the hallway. A guest book lay open on the table, filled with handwritten notes. Thank you for saving this place. This house feels like peace. I didn't know a building could feel kind. I traced the edge of the table with my fingers and smiled. Eleanor would have loved this. But I stepped onto the porch alone and sat in her chair. The same one. The one she always claimed. The tide rolled in, just as it always had, indifferent to time yet faithful to rhythm. I took Eleanor's notebook from my coat pocket, not to read, but simply to hold. I kept my promise, I said aloud. No answer came. But I didn't expect one. I closed my eyes and remembered her laugh, the way she'd lean into me during storms, the quiet certainty in her voice when she said, "Some things are worth protecting even if no one ever thanks you." Someone did thank her. Not with applause, not with headlines, but with care. But before I left, I added one final entry to the guest book. Not my name, just a sentence. If you're standing here, it means someone chose love over profit. I closed the book and handed it to Martha. For the next generation, I said. She nodded. They're already listening. But as I walked back to my car, I didn't look over my shoulder. This time I didn't need to. The house no longer needed me to defend it. The lesson had taken root. Eleanor's legacy wasn't the house. It was the boundary she drew, and the courage it gave others to draw their own. And as I drove away, the ocean shimmered in the distance, carrying her story forward the way she always intended. Quietly, endlessly, unstoppable. The end.